Hey guys, this is Azure guy, and we're going to talk about what is Iaas or infrastructure as a service. We'll be talking about what are host servers, what are virtual machines, and how things work in the backend. So let's get started. So guys, when we talk about IaaS or infrastructure as a service, it's one of the service which is given by Azure or other particular vendors which are there in the market, like Amazon. Amazon being the first and the oldest cloud vendor provider in the market had dominated the IaaS market like hell. So let's go and peep into it. What exactly is IaaS and infrastructure as a service means what we are getting served. Infrastructure, the whole infrastructure we get as a service, or a complete box or a VM or a desktop we get as a service. And we just use that particular service and uh, just pay what we use. So let's get started. So here you can see like you can see like every data centers, whether it's hosted by Amazon or Azure, it's equivalent to a single soccer stadium. Okay, and this soccer stadium would be having a large, huge number of containers. These are you can say it as a shipping container, and these shipping containers would be having would be having huge number of host servers, around 1,000 to 10,000 host servers. In certain cases, it crosses 30,000 host servers, and these host servers are mentioned. Containers having the host servers, which are mentioned in the blue color, and the host server is nothing but it can be your at home. If you are considering you have a desktop at home, then it can be your host server. And when you have a desktop at home, and on top of this desktop, using certain virtualization techniques like the using certain hub virtualization softwares like Hyper-V or VMware, you could host more than one OS in a particular host server. So your host server would be having can have any kind of operating system. Either it can be a Windows OS, Windows operating system, Win7, or it can be running with a Linux. And on top of it, you can install more OS in it on the same host server or on your desktop. So you'll be using either of the virtualization technique like Hyper-V here from Microsoft Windows. So Hyper-V will be taking and on top of that you'll be hosting a lot of OSs on top of it. It can be a Windows OS, Win 10 OS on top of Win 7, or it can be a Linux or Solaris or Oracle. So in the same scenarios, when we consider the bigger data center like an Azure data center, so these all are the containers having the host servers, and the host servers contains Hyper-V installed on it, and this particular host server operating system was uh, before till before 5 years, the OS was the same as we were using a raw OS, but now the Azure had made a customized the Windows OS for in order to get adaptability with the complete data center or traffic incoming and the mechanisms which happens in the inside the data center. So now the host server have a specific Windows Azure OS, you can say. On top of that, they'll be having with a Hyper-V, and on top of that, we have various VMs on top of it. Means we'll be having various installed OSs. Okay, it can be WinOS with Oracle softwares, or it can be VM2, can be a Linux or Windows OS, Windows Win7 OS or Win10 OS with Apache server installed on it. It can be depends upon the various demand on the market. Whatever market demands, those things will be there. So this particular complete data center would be run or run or controlled, or the calls, the allocation of host servers, which host server should have which particular VMs or something, would be controlled by Fabric controller, which we will be talking about in the later videos. We'll talk in the depth about how exactly the flow happens, or the fabric controller plays a role in managing the whole data center. Let's go to the next slide. So as we talked about, like the DC have on the DC have containers, containers have host servers have Hyper-V and VM, the VMs on top of it. So what happens whenever user comes, right? He just says that I want a VM1, or he just says that I want a Oracle VM. Okay, that so Fabric Controller will go and search about where is Oracle VM inserted and what particular region a customer is selecting. So basing upon the customer region he selects, the call goes to that particular DC. Okay, and then the VM would be, if it is installed in the VM2, that VM2 would be set up completely with that user credentials. Whoever the user would, having the right subscription would subscribe, then he will get this access to the VM2. Then he can RDP into it and he can install his application and done, use it as he wants. So what happens internally when we make a call to get a VM, to fetch a VM, or to when we get a VM, and the VM process, getting the VM process is like happens in within a seconds. So give me a minute. Happens within a seconds. So we talked about, when I say that host server has, so this is a host server, or the you can say as a guest OS. So the guest OS is installed with Windows 7, or now it is specific Windows Azure OS. So this particular specific Windows Azure OS will have certain drivers, okay, and then the VMs, VM2, and till the VM and the capacity of that particular host server it holds will have local disks. Once they have these local disk and drivers, how they play important role is like these VMs are there. These VMs like doesn't store their data on this particular local guest OS or the host server, as happens in the as happens in the as happens when we set up our desktop or our laptop with Hyper-V and we host VMs on top of it. So it takes certain memories from your C drive, which means that it keeps its OS files in your C drive or the selected drives which you put onto it. So but here the VM have its drives on onto the onto so have its local drive, local disk would be there, and the local disk would be cached, or the actual data would be stored in Azure storage or the respective Azure storage. And this Azure storage can be at a different region itself, or it can be or it can be in the same region. So making your compute power like VMs and Azure storage at one place makes the traffic in the data center low. If you keep your VMs, the compute power, and the Azure storage where exactly your data is written, it's far away place, then the performance may hit. But Azure has so good express internet connectivity that the the performance inside this never decreases, even if your compute power is in India and your Azure storage is somewhere in US. So what happens is whenever, so the data which would be stored or written, or the image of this particular VM would be, would be stored in the format of VHDs and Azure storage. And these VHDs, each VM, like VM1 is there, it has its local disk and the data which would be written and would be formatted into VHD format. And these VHDs are replicated into replicated or copied into three pieces. So and then three pieces are aligned up or copied to three different regions or three different DCs or three different nodes or three different rack servers, where the host server, one copy can be at the host server and the other copies can be at in the two different DCs on two different tracks. We will be showing about I'll be showing about what exactly a rack server and where exactly this host server sits. So just remember once, Like these, what are the three copies of VHDs? VHDs we have? We have three copies of it. It depends upon the user where he want to place them. And I'll be showing them in Windows Issue Portal how or where we can store them. And these Azure storage is also accessible via many calls or many methods. And these are they are REST APIs and endpoint. That there's a public endpoints which is exposed, like the REST APIs which are exposed, so that you partial can consume, or the REST APIs you can consume these VHDs. You can copy these VHDs from one location to another location. Like if you want to move this VM1 from Indian DC and the DC in India to DC in Switzerland. So what you will do is, it's easy that you just pick up a VHD from your storage account using Cloud Explorer, using Storage Explorer. Copy with Storage Explorer. VHD is again a file, okay, and this is stored in Azure storage. And the specific kind of Azure storage container which we have is a blob. So blob is nothing but binary large objects. So blob can store unrelational data, or it can store any kind of data. It can be images, videos, or .vhd formats itself. So when you want to move your VM from one location to the another location, it's very easy. You just take up this VHD. You can make you can make a call via partial and copy this particular VHD from this location to the destination location, and that's it. Once the VHD is raised into the destination location, you can boot up from that VHD, or you can go to the management portal, which is the single dashboard for accessing Azure resources. I'll show that. Let it open. Let me show you that. Which is single dashboard for accessing Azure resources, and you can just take your VHD into the new location and boot up from that place. It doesn't need to be constricted of a specific reason. Hope that helps. And let us go and check out what exactly manage.windows Azure. You can check that. You can see that this is manage.windowsazure.com, and this is Azure AD which I created. Azure AD, will talk about it later. So here are the resources. Here, this is the older portal, manage.windowsazure.com, and the new portal is called as portal.azure.com. Let it open. So when we say about, like, I want a virtual machine, you just go here, you create a virtual machine. You can you can get you can see this. You can see this. I said you about about compute power, and this is storage. You can see there's a compute. Under compute services we have virtual machines, and we can quick create with any name, or we can go to the gallery and pick up whatever we want. Like if you want a Windows Azure server, we have various options. We can have a SharePoint server, SQL server, this stock and everything. This is, you can say, as a marketplace. When I say about, you'll be taking out your VHDs from one location to another. At that time, you'll be seeing the VHDs, the images here in this location, and you just select this image and bring out in your location. So let's go and create a plain Windows server. So let's create a Windows server 2012 R2 data center. I'll be creating release date, virtual machine name. That's there is your guy. So we'll take a basic for a demo purpose. So you can see the various sizes of RAM which is available, or the core machine, or the compute capacity which is available here. So it's varies from A0 to A4. So you can see. So let's continue. We were talking about the sizes. Size we have various like A0 we have shared core. Shared core which means that you have the compute capacity but it will be a CPU which would be CPU or core capacity which would be shared among across other tenants in your particular host server. Or you can have a dedicated one core, two cores, or four cores, or eight core service. Just create, you just give a username. Let's try. You have everything in the place. Never. So I'll be letting you know what is a cloud service later. Let's select the default value. We'll be using these all are the locations where you can create Azure virtual machine at this point of time. Let's create one in Central India. So you can see the storage account. Okay, you have the compute capacity which is coming up, and the VHD goes and sits in a storage account. So for that only we require a storage account. And availability set, let's create an availability set because we don't have any availability set. I'll be explaining about availability set later videos. So let's continue. We were talking about the sizes. Size we have various like A0 we have shared core. Shared core which means that you have the compute capacity but it will be a CPU which would be CPU or core capacity which would be shared among across other tenants in your particular host server. Or you can have a dedicated one core, two cores, or four cores, or eight core service. Just create, you just give a username. Let's try. You have everything in the place. Never. So I'll be letting you know what is a cloud service later. Let's select the default value. We'll be using these all are the locations where you can create Azure virtual machine at this point of time. Let's create one in Central India. So you can see the storage account. Okay, you have the compute capacity which is coming up, and the VHD goes and sits in a storage account. So for that only we require a storage account. And availability set, let's create an availability set because we don't have any availability set. I'll be explaining about availability set later videos. So we can see we have the availability set, the Azure guy is, and for making the after you create a virtual machine, you need to you can RDP into that particular virtual machine. Okay, so you have a TCP protocol, and the private port, the default port would be assigned. And if you're making a call via partial, like starting up a virtual machine or stopping up a virtual machine, or you want to schedule when your virtual machine should start, or if it's a weekend you don't want to run your virtual machine and bear an extra cost, you want to stop it, you can do it, but that via partial. And for that you need to have this particular ports open. So let's go ahead. Yeah, so this is the install VM agent. So this will say the install VM agent. So the VM agents are nothing but these are virtual machine agent which would be used, uh, which actually takes up the call from Windows Azure Fabric, you can say, and it also gives the health details or health heartbeat to the fabric control, that the virtual machine is alive and it is able to be it is pingable and customer can RDP into it. Apart from that, apart from that, if you don't want the VM agent, you can uncheck this. And the configuration extensions, you have Puppet Chef, everything installed on it so that you can make your patch updates automatized, automatized by using the Puppet Chef DevOps concepts. And in order to meet security standards, you can have Microsoft anti-malware and other available services. Here you go. Yes, your virtual machine is in the process of creating. As it the first time, I'll be keeping it so that you can see this particular how exactly and how much time it takes for creation of a virtual machine. You can see the first part which happens is in creation of a virtual machine is like it would create a storage account at first. So the storage account is getting created. So wherever like we have selected Central India, so our storage account and the compute power would be sitting in the same space, in the same place. You can see it's provisioning your resources, virtual machines in Central India. And the URL you can access is the Azure guide. You can see now like it had created a storage account in the Central India and it have a VHD in that particular place. So VHD would be, if you have opted for Windows Server 2012 R2, as we have opted, then the VHD of that particular, the 2012 R2 specific VHD would be copied from Azure or repository to your storage account at no time. You can note the how much time it is creating, like you can have a local time which is in the previous screens and now, and we have success. It says that we successfully created the virtual machine and now it's provisioning to us. So when it says this one, it's like it had created in the back end, the fabric controller, the Azure fabric had created the resources at the behind and now it's provisioning, or what you can say is like it's creating it's creating credentials for me to get it connect, like Girish underscore calamity at hotmail.com is there. This is a user which is me, the Azure guy, and taking these credentials or subscription, I have access. I'm a paid user for this Windows Azure website, so it creates a user credentials in this particular virtual machines. That's what the provisioning means here. Let's wait and we can connect. Let's try connecting. Yes, so we have the RDP file through which we can connect. Let's try connecting. If you're able to connect, yes, connect. It's trying to connect. You can see the URL which would be, it will be accessing, or your VM is hosted. It you can access via the VM IP or the public IP, or you can access via this particular URL, the azureguy.cloudapp.net and the port number. Let me take a break. Let's this total provision process happens and then I'll come back. So as said, we have a virtual machines at our place and it had started and it took quite amount of time. Sometimes RDFE is slow. I'll be explaining what exactly is RDFE. Okay, so we have our machine here, and whenever your VM comes up or you're not unable to connect to your virtual machine, you can just go and you can take up this DNS name. If you want to know the IP also, just go to your CMT and you just ping to this particular the DNS name. Here is the DNS name, the cloud service name, and the IP corresponding to it. And you can check the status whether your VM is alive or not, or it's giving back the ping request or not. So once we have the Azure virtual machine, you can see the CPU percentage, the disk read or write or disk writes, everything, the network in, network out, how much it's going coming here in the graph. And you can have a monitoring endpoint here, the same thing, the charts available here, and you have the endpoints. You can add more endpoints to allow certain applications to pass on, or the applications which is installed on this particular virtual machine to get a traffic into it. Or you can configure, like you can increase the size. We selected a basic type. You can make it to standard. Standard will be having more uh, a read write capacity, or you can increase the virtual machine size at any time, just called as scale up. Okay, and we'll be talking about the availability set later at the point. So let's go now and let's connect to our newly created VM. We got the RDP file, we connect to it. Here we are, the password. Sorry. Looks like some credential issues. No problem. Give me time. We got another scenario here. My credentials are not working. I'm not able to RDP into this particular machine. Maybe the wrong credentials and new. Oh, I forgot my credentials. This old portal, and I said we have a new portal called as ARM portal. You can see that I have my cloud, I have my virtual machine created, and the storage account having the VHD is this one. So I said we have the compute power and we have a VHD sitting on the storage account, and the name would be like someone did something like default names which would be given by Azure. And the Azure, which every virtual machine in the older portal would be a part of, like if we are creating with the older portal or the classic portal, will have a cloud service attached to it as a container. So let's go and go to our Azure guy, the VM, and you can see you can reset your remote access or remote access credentials. Let's try resetting my credentials from the portal directly from the new portal. Let's reset and try again with the credentials if we are able to log into it or not. Sometimes what happens, like the RDP credentials get corrupt, or your machine is not making, you are unable to make RDP into your machines. So in that time you just come and just reset your remote access. You can use your older credentials and it won't change your credentials, but it would just reset the connection. Let it happen. In the meantime, let's see what exactly in the so in the older portal we have only the four sections, like disks, go insert it. We have points configure the monitor, but in the newer portal we have more. We can diagnose and solve problems if we have certain issues with our virtual machines, or we can give access control to any other user. We can add any other user to it. Like if you have your junior who gonna manage or install application on top of it, or you have your IT team who will install some security patches, you can add them, add the group, add the user, and then you can give a contributor or owner access to it. You have various roles also as well, which you can like create, like owner, contributor, reader, or everything. So which each of these roles actually mentions what exactly or what level of access or what changes you can make on this particular virtual machine. We'll talk about availability set. We have this here. So this is a VHD which is stored in the Azure storage, which we talked about. And These are the endpoints, the RTP points, and the partial points, and the IP address sections. So this is the dynamic IP or the DIP via which we are getting connected, or the DNS IP. And this is a private IP. If you want to make, if you want doesn't allow and doesn't want to allow outside people to RDP into it, you just or the calls to be made from your internal teams, and you can use your private IP to log into your instance. Your sizes, and increase your size. You have properties. You can see the complete properties of this particular virtual machine. So you have resource ID concept, everything. In new ARM, I'll be explaining them in later part. And this is my subscription name, pay as you go, and the subscription ID and the image name. This is the image name. You can see this is a Windows Server 2012 R2. As I said that the VHDs, whatever, or the Windows Server R 2012 R2, or whatever image type you select, it would be copied from Azure repos, VHD repos. So that particular repo, the VHD file repo name is this one, which the Azure stores. And you can enable diagnostics onto this VM. Just clicking on, you'll have diagnostics onto it. And this diagnostic can collect for you, like you can store this diagnostic logs in your config storage account. You can have, or you can store in the same account where you have your VHD sitting it. With that, you can see the storage account as PR portal VHDs. Inside this you have the VHDs, everything. So you can select what particular metrics you want about your virtual machine, how it is running, how the network bandwidth it's coming down or going up, or if you have a ASP.NET application, what are the ASP.NET metrics we have, the pool capacity, everything. Or if you just want to take up the Windows event system logs, everything into a Windows Azure storage account. You doesn't need to log in and go to the event manager to check what exactly the issue, and you doesn't need to give access to people or IT team to check what exactly happened to my VM. And as a dev, you can just provide this logs from your storage account. You can give a storage account the files from the storage account to your IT team, and IT team will analyze and get back to you. You can set up alert rules which says that, like, if your VM is going down, like the compute power had come down, like your VM sits on top of a host server having other adjacent VMs, like, so we were at this particular point we were like, I wanted to explain you noisy neighbor concepts and prevailing in Azure. So like we have provision of VM, the Azure VM, right? We got a VM here. Okay, we have successfully reset the RDP credentials as well, and we have a VM, the Azure guy. So let's see then. Let's hope that this particular Azure VM goes into, and this is a Central India host server, or the DC, and the VM which we created, the Azure VM, goes and sits on this particular, it takes up this VM1 slot. What happens is sometimes VM2, or it could be, given, or it's a shared infrastructure, it would have given to any other particular customer, and he's taking up or eating up a lot of network. And the network, you know this particular complete rack will be having a TOR switch, top of rack switch, and I'll be explaining on that as well. TOR switch, and the TOR switch has certain capacity of bandwidth which it can take. Okay, so VM2 can make a noise of taking up consuming huge number of bandwidth, and the VM1 can be hit. It can be the performance or the network in and out can be hindered with it. So for that only we require something called as alerts. So you go to the alerts and you add alert. You have your Azure VM. You'll give uh, network in drop. Description is the same. You select network in drop. Network is not coming into the VM then greater than or equal to 1 byte. of threshold. Threshold, we have set the limitation or the critical level. If it decreases more than, let's see, you can see it's the 300 KB. So if it decreases than one byte, then you can send emails to the default readers, or you can just give email ID of your IT operations team, anyone, operations xyz.com. And we have something called as webhook here. I'll be teaching about webhook later in the point of time when we cover all of the basics. The webhook are nothing but the Azure webhook. It's kind of like you can write a partial script for starting a VM, stopping a VM, and then you put onto you put on that particular script on a Azure webhook, and you and you will get an URL or endpoint. What you can do is like this particular, you can write a script to start up the Azure Guy VM, okay, script, and that particular URL you give here. So whenever the alert drops, the threshold or the network in or the CPU percentage drops in, you can just it will trigger this particular webhook, and that will run the partial script. If your partial script is like restarting a VM, then it will restart the VM and the CPUs would be back to the normal. Let's try RDPing into the VM dashboard, or you can go to the new portal if you want. Let's go with the new portal, Azure Guy. Let's say connect. You have the RDP file. Let's connect. Welcome. Okay, guys, I'm unable to connect to RDP. Maybe I have given the wrong credentials. Not a problem. You can try one. I'll be pasting out the Azure how to sign up. Azure sign up free. Let's start up for free. You had a 1 month free trial to try out everything on Azure. I'll be putting out this in my YouTube link. You can follow it. Thanks, guys. Signing off. Hope you understand the concepts which we talked about today, and I'm hoping for more of the questions, more questions on top of it, and I'll be answering them as soon as possible. And do remember to mention time frame of the video so that I can get exactly what particular questions you were asking about. Thank you. Thanks. This is the Azure guy. I'm signing off.
There's turkey in the oven, the mashed potatoes bubbling, watching football with our family and our friends. We smell the food a-cooking, and Grandpa keeps a-looking. Grandma pushes him out of the kitchen again. The little cousins, they all zoom, screaming loud from room to room. We don't seem to care.